Hello, friends and neighbors.
And warm greetings, Code Monkeys, and fellow veggies, of course.
Jesse and I are here back in the old split screen because we wanted to do a video together where we talk about Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
Or as I pronounce it, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, because it's easier to say for me.
Now, a quick caveat for before we get into our discussion here. Neither one of us have read this.
No.
We haven't read it. We haven't seen the play. We've only read, at least I have, I assume you have too, we've only read plot synopses online.
Correct.
So we're basically going to be talking about this in a conceptual sort of way. It's not going to be a review of the story or the play or anything like that. It's basically just going to be talking about kind of, should this exist, and is it something we feel is worth seeing or reading, or is it just kind of a waste?
So how do we want to start this one? Because there's a lot of angles we could approach this.
I'm going to start actually. I found on Wikipedia the play's official synopsis that was released by Pottermore. It was always difficult being Harry Potter, and it isn't much easier now that he is an overworked employee of the Ministry of Magic, a husband, and father of 3 school-aged children. While Harry grapples with a past that refuses to stay where it belongs, his youngest son Albus must struggle with the weight of a family legacy he never wanted. As past and present fuse ominously, both father and son learn the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, darkness comes from unexpected places. See, now, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting story. That sounds... And I'll say from reading the plot synopsis that I did, which again is the Wikipedia page, it seems like a lot of the play sticks with that. Like, kind of sticks with looking at the more interesting aspects of what would be the post Harry Potter story. You know, what would it be like to live with this past that Harry had? What would it be like to live as Harry Potter's child and having to inherit that legacy? Like, that's all really interesting stuff that I think that parts of the story seem to explore really well.
Yeah, it's a great premise, and like this, if that's the thing about a premise, though, is that it's just an idea, and ideas can be done well, and ideas can be done poorly. Mm-hmm. And I will say that I haven't read the Wikipedia plot synopsis, and it looks to be a little bit more detailed than the one that I had read. I read kind of an unofficial one, and this one, as Wikipedia is. Looks like it's I wouldn't say twice as long, maybe half again as long. There's this one thing that I just really want to skip to, but I feel like I should hold off on it. If it was a story centered just sort of primarily around the children of these characters, that would be one thing.
Yeah.
Because I've read plenty of stories that have done that. There's tons of people have their own, extended universe Harry Potter fanfic stuff. I know
my sister being one of them, yeah.
Yeah, she calls it the Pieces universe.
Yeah.
Good stuff, actually, by the way, if none of you have ever actually read that. Plug, shameless one at that. But, it's, everybody has their own kind of ideas about, where these characters should go and what would happen to them after the fact. Focusing on the children, I think, is a good idea, because one of the things that I really liked about the original ending of the Harry Potter series was that it was done. Harry's story was done. You made a video forever ago called "Why the Epilogue Isn't Crap."
My first ever VEDS video, actually.
Oh yeah,
Very
really?
first VEDS video I ever did was that video.
Oh man,
yep.
God, that's so long ago. You had this idea that, a big reason that a lot of people didn't like the epilogue is because it was a very definitive ending. Yeah. It says that the story of Harry is done, and people on some level don't want the story of Harry to be done, because we love this guy, we love these characters. And honestly, I think the parts of this play that suffer the most are the parts where they're trying to make it more than it needs to be, and more like a Harry Potter story, where it gets away from this more character-based idea and more into the fantastical, magical stuff. I think those are the parts where the story actually kind of suffers, at least from the synopsis.
I agree. From what I read in the Wikipedia synopsis, like, all of the character development that they have is really, really good. Like, even Harry. when they do talk about Harry the adult, Harry as a parent, Harry trying to relate to his son, that's all really, really well done. But I do think that the places where the story suffers are in the fantastical aspects of the story, because I feel like it's written in such a way that they don't really have a good handle on the world of Harry Potter and the way that the magic works. It's interesting because, I don't read as much Harry Potter fan fiction anymore, just because I don't. But I used to read a lot of it, and of course my sister's very into it and all that sort of thing. And we've had.
I'm actually working on writing some right now.
Nice.
Just as a side project. It's about. It's basically about Creature's last day of life.
Oh, cool.
The working title is Ancient and Most Noble. But. Nice. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, and what we've found, and Cassie and I have talked about this a lot, and what we've found is that the Harry Potter fan fictions that we like the least, the ones that are the worst, are either the ones that try to throw time travel into the story, or the ones that. What was the other big problem with this book?
I mean, a lot of them for me are systemic of the fact that they go with the whole time travel thing, and even J.K. Rowling has admitted in subsequent interviews that she kind of created a monster with the end of Prisoner of Azkaban. It was a really interesting idea, and part of what I liked about it is the sort of idea that they're not so much changing it as they're putting in the stuff that was already there.
Yeah, and that's why I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, and they're not actually changing time. They just didn't realize at the time that this was how things always were. The idea that they haven't actually changed the future. They haven't actually changed anything. They've just done the stuff that they already did, sort of. Already did is a weird phrase when time travel gets involved.
Yeah.
But that was the main reason why in the Department of Mysteries, in the fight where Sirius dies, there's a scene where all the time turners get destroyed in that scene because she needed to get the opportunity for time travel out of the series.
The rules for time travel in Azkaban were pretty tight. It wasn't like Doctor Who where anything goes. It was it was basically you can go back by hours and the timeline doesn't actually change. It stays constant. You're just inserting the things that were already there. And I think she was very, very careful when she wrote those scenes in Prisoner of Azkaban to illustrate that. And I think that's why that particular one worked.
Yes.
Because time travel isn't really something that you see in fantasy a lot, and there's kind of a reason for that. But it works in that. But when I was reading the time turner aspect of this particular plot of Cursed Child, it really did start to read like all the bad time turner fan fictions that I had read. First of all, it had them going back years instead of just a few hours. And apparently they were able to go back to precise times. They were able to specifically go back to the first challenge of the Triwizard Tournament, the second challenge, and so on.
This is information that, has only existed on Pottermore for a time, and you can, you can take that however you want. Like J.K. Rowling had said that, no time turner that had been made could go back farther than, I think, 5 hours. And that's actually one of the big problems that this story has, is it has to figure out, it has to essentially contrive a reason why they have a time turner that can do so much more than an actual time turner can.
Yeah.
Again, I really do want to stress, and I've said this before, that when we say this is bad fan fiction, there's a lot of fan fiction that we like.
Yeah.
And there's some fan fiction that's really, really good. But this, it really does read like bad fan fiction. Again, everything that's fantastical, it ends up feeling very contrived. It doesn't feel like a story that was written naturally to flow into an existing narrative. It felt like they had a story that they wanted to tell, and then they had to try to figure out how to make it fit. And it just doesn't.
Yeah. The other issue then is that it doesn't follow the original rules of time that were set in Azkaban, because they are able to change history, and alternate timelines are one of those things that if they're done really well, they can be really, really cool. But it really felt like they were creating alternate timelines for the sole purpose of inventing a world where things that felt like a fan fiction, basically, where they inventing a world where, oh, well, what if these different things didn't happen? What if this didn't happen? Which can be interesting as its own fan fiction. There's a whole branch of fan fiction for alternate universe stories. But to try to throw that into this story, it just doesn't mesh. And the further I read in the synopsis, the more I was feeling like this makes no sense. This is really dumb. Why are you doing this? What is going on?
Yeah, I think the big thing that's the most dumb for me is Voldemort's secret daughter.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
That's the thing that I mentioned earlier that I almost want to jump right to it, but it's the biggest, it's just about the dumbest thing that I could think of. Like, if somebody came up to me and asked me, like, okay, you have to pitch us a way to, you have to pitch us a new Harry Potter story that does its level best to ruin Harry Potter. The first thing I would think of would be Voldemort's secret child.
Yeah.
Like, Voldemort had a son, Voldemort had a daughter. It's so lame. First of all, it undermines the original series for a couple of reasons. The first of which being that Voldemort's whole thing is that he's not supposed to understand attachment. He's not supposed to care about that stuff. We never see any indication that he ever cared about anyone besides himself, with the possible exception of Nagini. And in fact, Dumbledore points this out, and it's like he thinks that the way Voldemort is connected to Nagini is the closest thing that Voldemort has ever come to feeling love for another being. And then the other thing that is just so dumb about it is that it's this idea that heredity, and I don't know if heredity is a word, but like circumstances of birth, like, aren't supposed to matter. It's the whole thing with, with Muggleborns and purebloods. It's, it's not supposed to matter, how you're born. The reason that Voldemort is, is the way he is not because of any circumstance of his birth. Although some people argue that part of the reason he couldn't understand love was because he was conceived under the effects of a love potion, which is not something that I really like, but I can kind of understand where people are coming from. It's the way that he was treated, and the way that he grew up. He's sort of a dark version of Harry. He grew up in this, this negative situation, but rather than do what Harry did, which was to learn how to rise above it as best he could, he decided, essentially to not care about anything but himself and look out for number one. Essentially, just because Voldemort had a child, and I wouldn't even have so much of a problem with that if they did something interesting with it, but it's Voldemort's child is evil because it's the child of Voldemort.
Yeah.
And for not a whole lot of other reason. And that it really bothers me.
Yeah. No, and I think I agree with you there. I also have problems with Voldemort having a child for the same reasons that you mentioned. And also it's another one of those fan fiction cliches. Let's throw Voldemort with Bellatrix. That's come on. Bellatrix's perception of Voldemort's feelings for her was so twisted. There's no way there was actually anything there. The only acceptable thing I've seen with those two is with Harry Potter musical, which A, is done as a joke, and B, it makes it very clear that it's all one-sided on Bellatrix's side. Even if they did come up with a convincing way for Voldemort to have fathered a child, to say that they're just automatically evil. There's so many interesting places you could go with that plot line. There's so many interesting things that you could do with that. They could even parallel it with what Albus is going through. With Albus being, Albus is the son of Harry Potter. He has to live up to that legacy. A child of Voldemort would have to live up to that legacy. And for both of them to kind of, come to that conclusion where I can be my own person. I don't have to be my parent. And to live through that. That could be such an interesting plot point, and it would also strengthen the message that I think that the play is ultimately trying to tell. But I really do feel like all of that the bad fan fiction-y aspects of the story really do run this story way off the rails. Like it had potential to be something really, really strong, but it just gets run so far off the rails by these other things that I feel like, and again, haven't read it, haven't seen it, but I really do feel like the story fails fundamentally, both as a story in its own right and as a Harry Potter story.
But really, quite apart from all of that, you know, whether or not this was, you know, this is a good story is almost kind of secondary to me, to the question of, should this even exist at all? Mm-hmm. Is this a story that should be told? And honestly, I don't think it should. I don't think it should, because one of the reasons I don't mind Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, one of the reasons that I don't mind that movie in a conceptual way is that, obviously it's not out yet, so I can't say if I actually like it.
Right.
But one of the reasons that it doesn't bother me on a conceptual level is because, you know, okay, it's in the same universe, but it's a totally separate story.
Yeah.
Right? And I've always felt that if the Harry Potter series was to go anywhere, that should be the direction that it should be taken.
Agreed.
Don't worry about Harry. Don't worry about Hermione, Ron. Don't worry about any of these people, right? Mm-hmm. Their stories have been wrapped up and told in a satisfying way. And even if you want to tell a story about Harry Potter's children, you don't need to bring Harry into it, really. Hermione, you know, has parents, and I don't think, do they ever even get lines in the books? I don't think they do.
No,
I don't think Hermione's parents even get any lines. I know we see them at one point.
Yeah.
But obviously, Ron, his parents factor into the story, but that's because it makes sense for them to be there.
Yeah.
I don't see the need for this story beyond the fact that people want more Harry Potter.
Yeah, and I really think that's what it boils down to. You probably remember the Hank Green song "Book 8."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I will say, it came out in 2008. It was kind of a sequel to Osseo Deathly Hallows, and basically talking about, I want a Book 8. I want more Harry Potter in my life. And I liked the song from the perspective of someone who really did enjoy Harry Potter and would love to have seen more stories from that universe. Mm-hmm. But there were definitely aspects of it where I was listening and being like, this... I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this idea, because I don't want to see a continuation of Harry Potter's story, because Harry Potter's story is done. I do think that the aspects about Cursed Child that I do find the most interesting are the ones where we're focusing more on the next generation, where we're focusing on Albus and Malfoy. And if we are going to bring Harry into it, do it from the perspective of him having to deal with being a father, which is a completely different story for him. Like that, that would be an acceptable way to bring Harry into it. Not having to fight the same battles that he fought before, but having to fight the relatively mundane battle of, how do I relate to my son? Like, I would be fine with that.
And that story, I think, should take place basically entirely in the background.
Yeah.
Like, almost like, have you seen the Lego Movie?
Yes.
Okay, like, kind of like how you find out that, like, the kid's dad is the character he based Lord Business on. Mm-hmm. And the story still, takes place entirely separate from the dad's perspective. But just because of how Will Ferrell acts in that scene, you see his entire character journey happen on his face. If you're going to tell a story about Harry Potter's children, have it be about Harry Potter's children from their perspective. Have it stay there. And if you're going to bring Harry into it, have it be peripheral. And, he can be clearly going through something, but it needs to be subtextual for it to work, for me.
The phrase that my sister has been using that I really like is the phrase from Dark Knight. You either die a hero or you live with being the villain or whatever.
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Thank you, that's the line. She's been using that, and that is such an accurate line that kind of conveys what my fear is for Cursed Child and for the future of the Harry Potter series. Because I'm a big fan of the Xanth series, which I talked about in relation to the Companions of Xanth game that I reviewed a few weeks ago. I'm a big fan of that series. It's silly, pun-based fantasy, but the early books were really pretty well-constructed stories, and I think they do still hold up. But it was originally intended to be a trilogy, and it just kept going. Like, he just kept writing more and more books, which at first was fine, because he was still putting out original content. The series should have ended long about book 15. The series is currently about 35, 36 books long now. And he's still publishing a Xanth novel like clockwork every single year. And the last one I read, I think, was like book 30 or book 31, and it was just bad. It was just plain bad. Like he's clearly phoning it in. He's clearly doing it for the money, and he's not really even trying anymore. He's just putting it out there because he feels like he needs to for the fans or for his own well-being or whatever. That is what I desperately do not want to happen to the Harry Potter series, where they just keep putting out more and more of these ridiculous stories just for the sake of placating the fans who want more Harry Potter, more Harry Potter. That's why I never wanted a book 8. I never wanted there to be any more stories, aside from maybe something like Fantastic Beasts of Where to Find Them, where we just get some other story from the same universe. I never wanted a continuation of this plotline because it works as a 7-book series as it is. It doesn't need anything else.
Part of me worries that it's kind of inevitable because, the simple fact of the matter is that Harry Potter has moved so far beyond J.K. Rowling, and it moved far beyond her a long time ago. And there are some things that I like about that. I made a video talking about, how I think that there's a lot of good things that can come as a result of that. I don't think that J.K. Rowling necessarily always makes the best decisions when it comes to her own world. I made mention of Harry Potter headcanons in the video previously where I was discussing The Cursed Child, and I said that I shouldn't get into that right now because then we'll be here all day. And people want me to talk about some of those. J.K. Rowling will take to Twitter a lot and confirm or deny, almost exclusively deny, fan theories and headcanons about the Harry Potter series. And sometimes it's done for no particular reason other than she just decides it, even when it would make something really, really interesting and when there's a lot of evidence for the theory within the series. And I mean, for me, just a really big indicator of the fact that she doesn't always make the best decision when it comes to her own series is the fact that she decided that this story is canon.
Yeah.
Of all the stories that you could tell in the Harry Potter universe, even if you were going to bring Harry into a story, I just don't think this is the way to do it, and I don't think this is a story that needs to exist or needs to be told. I don't think it adds anything to Harry Potter as a series. I think it undermines some very fundamental concepts of the Harry Potter series. Just from having read the plot synopsis, we haven't seen the full execution. No. The point is that based on what we've seen, nothing makes us want to. No. Nothing gives us faith that this could be a thing that is worth our time. I feel like this one might have been kind of a downer. I apologize for that. But we do not have a lot of happy feelings about this story.
Well, if you want something more of an upper, tomorrow actually is going to be the next episode of our podcast, We Talk Stuff, yes, which we also recorded today. And that one we are going to be talking about some things that might not be terribly popular or people might not like, but that we really love. And so that's definitely going to be more of an uplifting sort of thing, us talking about us loving these things. So we would invite you to tune into We Talk Stuff. You can find a link to our podcast in the video description of either one of our videos. And
if you stuck around to the end of this video, I know this is probably going to end up being quite a long one because we kind of went on there. If you stuck around, I'll just go ahead and tell you, we're going to be talking about the NBC show Heroes, and we're going to be talking about Disney's Hercules. So there you go. That's tomorrow. But yeah, I think we've pretty much rambled on about this long enough.
I think so.
So yeah, until next time, Code Monkeys and fellow Vedsies and friends and neighbors. Yes. We will see you tomorrow.
Bye now.